Hi and welcome to this video. I'm going to show you how you can use flows in AttackForge to create opportunities in Salesforce. Flows is a new module in AttackForge, which is purpose-built for automations and integrations. Before we get started, you'll find a copy of this flow on our support site, so you can always follow along here as well. And if you head over to the AttackForge Flows GitHub repository, there's an example here for Salesforce as well. So you can download this example flow and then import that into your own AttackForge to get started fast. So let's start by checking out a flow in action. So let's head over to AttackForge and we'll see that we have a flow configured here to create an opportunity in Salesforce every time a project request gets created in AttackForge. So let's go in and request a project. So we're going to come to the projects module and click on new project request. And now I'm just going to fill in some custom scoping form that I've created. Now, AttackForge does allow you to completely configure your project intake form. So you can customize it to exactly what your specifications are. So here I'm asking some specific information based on the type of testing that the users selected, in this case web application, and also just getting some other generic information that we'll need as well. So once we submit that request, we'll see that this project request is now pending approval. And if we jump into Salesforce and refresh, we'll see that a new opportunity has just been created. And if we open that up, we'll see some of that information which is now being sent across. So let's take a look at how all of that actually happened behind the scenes. So within that flows module within AttackForge, and again, you'll see this if you have access within the integration section, we can see I have an example here to create an opportunity in Salesforce. And if we open that up, we'll see that one run of that flow just happened right now, and that was creating this opportunity in Salesforce moments ago. So let's take a look at that to see what was actually happening. So the first thing you'll notice is that there's two steps which are part of this, or two actions I should say, which are part of this particular flow. The first one is to get a Salesforce OAuth token, and the second one is to create the Salesforce opportunity. Now, with each action, we can dive into the HTTP request itself, so we can see which endpoint that we were reaching out to. In this case, it's the login.salesforce.com common endpoint for generating a token. And we can see that it responded back with a 200 request. And we can see what information we'd actually sent across, and also the headers as well. And as a response back, we received information from Salesforce, including the OAuth token that we can now use for subsequent requests to talk to Salesforce. We can also see the response headers as well. Now separately, we can also look at the logs, and this is useful if we have extra information that we might want to debug for troubleshooting purposes, or if there's been any errors as well. In the second action, we can see that this one was focusing on creating the opportunity itself. So here we can see what information we passed to our Salesforce environment, and here we can see that this was a new opportunity that we were leveraging. Now, this particular API is the one that we're using can be accessed from the developer.salesforce.com site, and it's we're looking at records. So there's information here about, in general, how to use records, and for us, we're using an opportunity record as part of this API request. And there is more information as well about opportunities in terms of all the different types of fields which are supported, and other information that's going to help you with really personalizing your interactions with your Salesforce environment. So coming back to AttackForge, let's now take a look at how this flow is actually working behind the scenes. So we're going to open up the flow and click on edit. And you'll notice again that this flow is configured to run on a project request created event. Because this use case is looking at opportunities, that makes the most sense in AttackForge from a project request, because it's a potential new opportunity for some type of service to be delivered. But again, you can set up your events based on your particular use cases as well. So we'll notice that the first step is to get a Salesforce OAuth token. And that is a post request which goes out to this particular URL, which is a sort of more generalized URL for generating tokens, or service, I should say. And as part of that, we are sending some information which is going to be URL encoded. So that's where we're setting the content type header. And again, all of this is documented in Salesforce's documentation as well. In the request script, we can see that we are leveraging some information here from our secrets. So firstly, on the right-hand side, we have information about the project request. So this is the test context. So because we're building a generalized flow, this is some example or mock-up data to help us with understanding what information we would have that we can access. On the right here, we can also see the different flows, secrets that I've created. So as part of the authentication process with the API, there are some different sets of information that we need to leverage for this request, including the client ID and client secret, the OAuth information, as well as the username and password for the user. Now, that information will be sent in a request body. So here on the left-hand side, we're using AFScript to construct a request body that we're going to send to that endpoint, the login endpoint for Salesforce, to retrieve that token. Now, if you've never used AFScript before, highly recommend to jump onto our support site, watch the video, have a read through. AFScript is AttackForge's own programming language, and this is going to help make the creation of your flows much faster. So what we're doing here, we're firstly just setting the request that we're going to make, setting its body to include the grant type, client ID, client secret, as well as username and password, which again is all required properties from Salesforce's documentation for this API. And separately, we're going to pass the project request along as data. So what we want to make sure that all of this information about the project request is then going to be available later on, when in the next action, when we are going to actually submit a new opportunity to Salesforce. So we're going to take the entire data object and include that as the data we're passing on to the next part of the flow. So the response back from this first action should hopefully be an OAuth token. So we can take that response script and have a look at how we can extract that token and then continue our flow. So the response will come back from Salesforce, and we can access that information within AttackForge as an object. So response has a status code, which is the HTTP status code from the server, the response headers, and the response body. Now, the particular headers that we're expecting for this endpoint is application JSON. And so what we're doing here on our response script is just making sure that we can pass the body so we can try and extract the access token from it. And if that is the case, then we can retrieve that access token and now inject that into our data, which we're going to continue now passing into the next action. So the next action is going to have the project request, which was passed along from a previous request script, and we're also now adding another property called the SF access token or Salesforce access token, which is coming directly from this response script. So let's open up the second action and take a look. So the second action is going to now actually create a Salesforce opportunity. It's again, based on the documentation, we're submitting a post request and we're pointing it to a particular API endpoint that is going to support creating a record for an opportunity. Now, we can set the headers. In this case, all we need to set right now is the content type to application JSON. And if we open up the request script, we can see what the payload's actually going to look like. So here in the request script, we're doing some checks firstly to make sure that do we have the project request data from the previous action, and do we have the Salesforce access token? If we don't have that, then we need to abort the flow because there'll be no possibility to create the opportunity in Salesforce. However, if we have that information, so what we're doing now is we're just taking some information from the end date. So when the user submitted the project request, one of the fields we have in the form is based on when they need testing to be completed. So what we're doing is we're extracting that information, and then we're going to use that in terms of submitting a close date on our opportunity. So this is really what our request body is going to look like. So we can see within our request, we are setting an additional header. So in the previous step, we were setting the content type header. Now we're also setting the authorization header. And this is because we now have the Salesforce access token, and because this is being done dynamically, we need to set it within this script. So here we can set the header to make sure that the access token is being sent across, and we're also now constructing our body. This is a sort of very simple opportunity. It only has three fields or properties: the name, the stage name, and the close date. However, when you're building your integration with Salesforce, again, you've got that flexibility to add as many or as little fields as you need for your own requirements. But here for the name, we're simply pulling the information from the project request and using that information as well. So this information will get sent across to Salesforce to create the opportunity, and the response will come back. And again, we want to take that response, make sure that it's coming back in an appropriate format. In this case, it's appropriate status code, and the body is passable. And so we're looking particularly here for a 201 status code to be returned from the Salesforce API, and separately making sure that we have an ID returned for this opportunity, and also making sure that the success field is being set to true. And if all of that is true, then we can simply wrap up our flow, because we know that we've now successfully created an opportunity in Salesforce. If that's not true, then we can return an error, and you can always add additional logging here if you wanted to have some extra information here for really sort of for debugging or troubleshooting purposes. So that's really all there is to it. You can integrate your AttackForge with Salesforce based on your requirements. This is, again, a very simple example looking at opportunities, but you may have other needs to get AttackForge data into Salesforce, and you can use a very similar approach. I hope you enjoyed this video, and thanks for watching.